Welcome to the CMO Chapter podcast, where we dive deep into the dynamic world of Chief Marketing Officers. Join us as we explore the careers, insights, and strategies of top marketing executives who shape the brands we know and love. Whether you're a seasoned marketer, aspiring CMO, or simply just curious to understand what it really takes to step into the shoes of a CMO. This podcast is your backstage pass to discovering what it's like to really lead and innovate in the ever-evolving landscape of business. Stay tuned as we uncover the stories of the visionaries behind the brand. Okay, so I am delighted to have the fabulous Gabrielle Dolan on. I think we're now on episode 1 for the CMO Chapters podcast. So Gabrielle, welcome.
I'm so excited to be speaking to you, Lucy. I can't wait.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm really excited to have you on, actually, because, I feel like I've known you for, I'm going to say, I don't know now, 6 months, maybe, I think about, on and off.
Yeah, it hasn't been long. Hasn't been
too long.
It feels longer than 6 months.
It does. It does indeed. In a good way. I've got a lot of questions. We've got a little bit to get through because, as we know, you've obviously written a book recently on story intelligence. So I've got a bit there that I want to sort of dive into. But before we get into it, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Gabrielle Dolan, as you said in the intro. Most people call me Rel. My little sister could never pronounce my name and she'd call me Gabrielle. So Rel has stuck. But I've spent the last 21 years of my career teaching business people how to communicate more effectively through stories. So prior to that, I worked at National Australia Bank. I worked in senior leadership roles and change management roles towards the end. And it was in those roles that I started to realise the power of storytelling. I could see it was a skill, and I sort of thought, you know what? I think storytelling is something people need to learn how to do better. So I thought, what the hell? Maybe I could be that person to teach people, having never run a business before or never taught storytelling before. But I had actually done a lot of designing and delivering of leadership programs. So I knew I could design and deliver a leadership program around storytelling. And yeah, that was 21 years ago. I thought I would just see if it worked out. If it didn't work out, I'd go back and get another job in corporate. It'd be fair to say it's worked out.
I think it's worked out really well. You've 20 years now, 21 years?
It's 21 years and counting. So yeah, I worked in corporate for 20 years. And so now I've been out. But yeah, clearly I still work very, very closely with corporate.
Yeah, absolutely. So why do you think... Why storytelling? I'm just trying to think, because from my perspective, I feel like I'm only really getting into this now, if I'm being completely honest, since I've certainly got to know you and obviously from reading your book and, following you on LinkedIn. But let's go back 20 years ago. I can imagine storytelling back then. Was that a bit of a new sort of, oh my God, what is this?
The typical reaction I got was, what the hell is storytelling got to do with business? It was like, ooh, once upon a time. And people just, the amount of times people said to me, hang on a minute, you left your corporate job, well-paid job, to teach people storytelling. Like, are you mad? And so, yes, that was very much the general reaction back then. When I was still at NAB and I sort of had this feeling, I was in change management roles, right? So, you're going out to the business units and you're explaining why we need to change.
Yeah.
And of course, every business unit says, no, we don't need that because we're special and blah, blah, blah. Everyone says it. And what I found is when I shared a story, it wasn't a magical silver bullet, but it sort of put people's defenses down a bit, and they sort of at least listened. And I would, often get, well, I guess that makes sense, or I never thought about it that way. And I started to reflect that it's when I shared a story that got through. And then I actually started to notice around me that I would see people speak on stage and go, they're brilliant presenters. And then I was thinking, the reason they're brilliant presenters is because they're sharing stories. So I sort of started to notice the great presenters were sharing stories, the brilliant leaders that I wanted to work with were sharing stories, Like, we always know great salespeople share stories and great teachers share stories. So I had this inkling that it was a skill, and then I came across this book written by Stephen Denning. I think it was called the Organizational Guide to Storytelling. And he was an ex-World Bank. He was an ex-senior exec at the World Bank. And Lucy, I just seriously read that book, and I was thinking, I knew it. I knew there was something in this. And the fact that he was an ex-senior executive at the World Bank, I'm thinking, if someone in that position is writing a book on the power of storytelling, then there's absolutely something in this. So, so like I said, 21 years ago, I thought, what the hell, I'm going to give this a crack. Our kids were 2 and 5 at the time, and I just seriously thought, if it doesn't work out, I'll have a couple of years home with the kids and I'll just go back and get another job.
Yeah. Good on you. And it was a risk, obviously, that paid off. So here we are.
Yeah, it was a risk. Yes, it's funny. It didn't feel like a risk at the time. I'm not sure why. I think because I just had the attitude, well, I'll give it a go, and if it doesn't work out, I'm home, a year or 2 with the kids, and then I'll just go back and get another job. I had no, I knew I could come back and get another job, so that wasn't an issue. So it didn't overly feel like a risk, but it was, in hindsight, we decided, me and my husband collectively decided to reduce our income by 60% because I was, earning more money than him, and that was a joint decision.
So, from when I look at someone yourself, I see you as a bit of the guru when it comes to all things stories. So, is this something naturally that you've been really good at, that you've, I guess, identified yourself with and gone, you know what, as you've said earlier, okay, there's something in this and off I go? Or have you yourself had to also, really, I guess, hone in on your own craft and keep developing that as well?
A bit of both. My mates that I went to school with and I still keep in contact with, so they've known me since I was 12, and, they just think it's so appropriate that I'm doing what I do because they say, you were the one that was always telling the funny stories at the pub. But it was like one of my oldest mates, we lived together for a while, and something would happen during the day at home and I would just start chuckling to myself. And she goes, you were going to retell this story at the pub tonight and it's going to be so much more funnier than what had actually happened. I go, yeah, I know, because So there was a bit of that. But the reality is we're all storytellers. We actually all tell stories. And some people are absolutely better at telling stories than others, just naturally. Some people are naturally better at tennis than others. Okay, so that's a given. But everyone can get better at it. So yes, I have, over the last 21 years, gone through, figured out what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes when you tell a joke, and you can tell a joke and everyone laughs, and you can tell a joke, to the different people next week, and you think it's the same way, but no one laughs. And there'll be elements that you forgot to say or didn't say or was in the delivery. And so it's the same with the story. There's things that I can hear a story and people go, I don't know why it didn't work. And I go, this is why it didn't work. And so it's teaching people the process, that hopefully a repeatable framework that will increase their chances of their stories landing and being effective.
Yeah. And on that, why are stories so effective? Why is it that when we listen to a story, and you've got a job doing this, why is it so important?
Yeah, it's so there's a whole heap of research done by neuroscientists, very smart people, that say that when our brains hear a story, it taps into emotion. And the brain processes emotion different to logic in 2 different ways. So first of all, we actually make decisions based on emotion, and business need to realize this, because business, you just go, we're not making decisions based on emotion, it's on logic and blah blah. We always make decisions based on emotion. It's like, whether it's buying the latest iPhone or a new pair of shoes or a house, or buying or working for a company or working for you, or, decide in a job interview, deciding people are walking out going, I think we could really work with them. I think they'd be a really great fit and all. That's their emotional decisions. Now, yes, it needs to logically make sense. So I'm not saying you don't have the logic. You still need the logic there.
Okay.
But we're human beings and all human beings make decisions based on emotion. So a story taps into emotion. And what the brain also does with emotion, it stores it in the long-term part of our brain. So if a well-told story, not in all stories, if it taps into emotion, now I'm not saying emotional, like it's going to be really sad or anything, but it taps into emotion and therefore you remember the stories. So, and look, when I speak to people, we sort of know this. Like you go, yeah, like people go, I remember I saw this great presenter and he told us its story and they can retell me the story. And I go, oh, how long ago was this? And I go, oh, that would have been over 10 years ago. And I go, what else can you remember from that presentation? Nothing except the story. So that's why stories are really powerful on several things. It helps people understand the message. It helps people remember the message because they've remembered the story. And ultimately, they can retell the story without losing its meaning.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So I was reading the book, The Fabulous Story Intelligence here last night, and I found it so interesting because, as we know, we're in a world of AI now. And I think something that you mentioned in that book, which I really resonated with, was we are in a world of distrust now. Absolutely. Where naturally there's so many of us out there that see so much content on LinkedIn, or we hear stories and we go, yeah, nah, that didn't really happen. Or LinkedIn, or, AI wrote that. So, the book that you recently wrote, I mean, God, it's just so interesting. And I loved all these individual different stories in there as well. And the exercise that you did around, did AI write it or did I? And
testing.
I picked what you did. I could tell. I won't spoil it, but anyway. So, I mean, and I love the analogy as well when you said Batman and Robin. It's kind of like, your story is Batman and then Robin see it as AI. So I guess my question is, if you were speaking to, say, marketers, because I mean, there's going to be marketers listening to this, how can they best, would you say, use storytelling when say it's a CMO and they're in their role, they're often talking externally about a brand and promoting that brand story. How best can they perhaps use it more so internally, even when they're working with their own team?
Yeah, so the vast majority of the work I do, Lucy, is I go into organizations and teach the leaders how to tell stories. And it's normally around the values or the brand or the culture, but, it's whatever you call it. It's like, this is what we value. These are the behaviors we expect. This is what we want to be known for. And my focus is on personal stories. So they didn't happen at work because I think they're the most powerful and they're the most underutilized. So a lot of the times when companies talk about their values, they talk about, work-related stories. So if if one of their values is exceptional customer service, they'll share stories of their employees delivering great customer service, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I call them professional stories, but you can add on the public story. So going back to your question, if you've got a CMO or a CEO or any senior exec and they want to talk, they're either talking internally to their people, as in this is the behavior we want, this is the culture we want, this is, the values we value. Or even if it's external people, like you're trying to recruit people. And like, seriously, I'd be sharing these stories in a job interview, for example, because as we know, or as you would know, it's you're selling the job as much as the people are trying to want the job. They're having a decision on whether they work for you as well.
Absolutely.
And it's an emotional decision, remember that. So I would say to any executive that's trying to communicate values, is first of all list the values, and it doesn't necessarily need to be only the company values. It could be your own values as well. And what people tend to do initially is go, oh, we value integrity, we value transparency, we value collaboration, and it's just words, right? Well, words. And you're like, seriously, you throw a blanket over every corporate organizational values, and 95% of them are exactly the same, just worded differently.
Yeah.
So that's where we start. But then I go, well, what does that mean to you? So you've just said we value collaboration. I would go, well, what does that mean to you? And I say to people, what does it mean to you personally?
Mm.
Because straight away they go, well, the team works towards a, shared goal, blah, blah, blah. Again, like, what does that mean? So I keep asking them personally, and you would be surprised how many senior execs I say, what does it mean to you personally? And they'll have a think about it and they'll say something. And I go, what else does it mean to you personally? And they'll go, ooh, good point. You've really, you've put me on the spot here. I haven't thought about it this much before. So the real challenge before we even get to the story is what does collaboration really mean to you personally? And ask yourself, and then you'll drill down, and instead of saying things like working as a team, there'll be elements like seeking everyone's feedback or at least listening to people's feedback or concerns about whatever it is, right? And then we find a story. And then, so my advice is you find a personal story. And the really powerful ones, let's just say there's an example about it's actually seeking and listening to people's feedback is the message. I would say, think of a personal story as it didn't happen at work when you didn't do that. And a lot of people go, well, why would I share a story when I didn't do it? Because sharing stories about when you didn't do it, and it could be like, you're on holidays with friends and someone suggested, oh, wouldn't go that way. And you go, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And then you've gone that way and, crap happened, right? It could be as simple as that. It doesn't even have to be these big major stories. And then when you're sharing the story, of course, you're getting across the fact that you've either regretted that decision or you've learned a really valuable lesson and things like that, which now means that value is really important to you. I know that value is really important to you.
I think, and I find as well myself, because I personally, practice this myself, and I find it's the bridge, isn't it? It's the link between the personal story and then getting it across to exactly what it means from a business perspective, the commercials. And I think as well, if you get that right, if you nail it, then it's going to really pack a punch and resonate.
Yeah.
I've also personally listened to a lot of, my friends are going to hate this, but I've got friends absolutely, and they go, oh my gosh, this happened the other day. Oh, it was hilarious. And they'll be on for 30 minutes about this bloody story. And you're like, my God, like, it can't be that funny. And actually, you lost me at 10 minutes, actually. So there's a bit of an art with it, isn't there? And I'm sure part of what you're doing is obviously coaching people to tailor how to structure the story.
Yeah. One of a common mistake is that their stories just go way too long. So way too long. My advice is your story should be roughly around about 60 to 90 seconds. You can tell some brilliant stories in 30 seconds, but if your stories are going 2 minutes or longer, they're just too long. And there's a real discipline in getting your story succinct. And part of the process I teach is if you're really clear on that single message, then that will determine what information you put in your story and most importantly, what you leave out.
Wow.
And sometimes people get full, they're telling the story and everyone's listening. So they start adding more and And it was just like, and I think the more senior people get, the more inclined to do this. So it's,
Definitely.
there's the saying I often say, you didn't get any funnier, you just got more senior. It's the same with your stories. Your stories didn't get any more engaging, you just got more senior. And people are politely nodding when they're really thinking, get to the point.
So true. So true. So in this market, obviously as a recruiter, I do a lot of work with marketers who are, as we know, there's a lot of people out there looking for work right now, unfortunately. And it's a really competitive story. And, I see a lot of CVs where we've got fantastic key achievements. The CVs look great, and I say this to so many people all the time, know your narrative, know how to, tell your story, how to, articulate yourself. But there's a lot that don't. And I don't know if that comes down to confidence, but how can these people listening, how can they use storytelling to better sell themselves, especially in an interview as well? Because I'm sure this would be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Job interviews are the perfect opportunity to share stories. Like, often when I work with people and like I'm going, oh, you share a story in a presentation or with your team, and they go, what, you just start your story? And I was like, well, yes, you do, but you're clear on the message. Job interviews are the perfect opportunity because, I assume people still follow the BI process, do they? The behavioural event, tell us a time when.
Yeah, the STAR technique, situation,
Yeah,
task.
STAR technique or yeah. So what I would say, if I was advising people going for a job interview, the point is you don't want to use the job interview to regurgitate your entire CV or resume. Like you've got the job interview. So I think the fact that you've got a job interview, you're ticking quite a few of the technical boxes or the skill or the experience boxes. I would go and be very clear on what values that the company, look at the company values and what they value. I think have a good idea of what values or behaviors would be expected in the role as well.
Uh-huh.
And then I would go through the process of having both a personal story and a professional story to communicate them. So again, if, one of the values they talk about is collaboration, I would have a professional story of when you've done that and potentially a personal story. Now you may not share both, but I would be prepared for that because they could sort of go, well, why is collaboration important to you? Now that's a perfect time to go and share the personal story. Personal stories are really valuable too if you're lacking a little bit of industry experience. So you might not have, or you're quite young. So, if this is your first or second job, you're not going to have as many work-related stories as, someone in their 40s or 50s. But you've probably got these amazing experiences, when you're in, Girl Guides or Scouts or, going on a school excursion and you did. So you think about those lateral stories that still demonstrate collaboration or they still demonstrate risk taking and you're sharing the personal stories. You could even share stories about your parents or your growing up that show that this is part of you. You were raised with this value because your parents instilled it in you.
Yeah. It's so true. And it's really funny we're talking about this. So I've got my parents visiting at the moment from the UK, which is fun and games. And I was chatting to my dad actually last night and I said, oh, I'm interviewing, Gabrielle. And he's like, he's Gabrielle Dolan. Anyway, we went through the whole background, etc., storytelling. And he said, it's really funny, he said, because he used to be quite senior at British Aerospace and he was there for about 40 odd years. And he got his last job, which was overseeing, I think, customer service, because he mentioned in that job interview that when he was younger, he saw how important customer service was working in his dad's DIY shop where they were like measuring nails, and scales and all that kind of stuff. And the HR director actually said to him afterwards, oh, you got that job because we loved that story and how much customer service, how much you valued that as a child. And I said, well, there you go. This is why it's so important. And I think you're right. You're so right. It makes it, when people tell me stories that are articulate, they get to the point, they resonate with exactly what we're talking about. It really packs a punch. It's so important.
Yeah. That's a great example. So it's a great example because what a story does is, I want to go back to Aristotle's model of influence where he said the three most important things when you're trying to influence people, and you look at a job interview, that is the ultimate, you're trying to influence people to hire you. You need logos, ethos, and pathos, which is logic, personal credibility, and emotional connection. And what we tend to do with a CV is we go on logic. Oh, I've done this before. These are the results. And that the approach with the STAR technique, where this was the situation, this is the task, and this is the result. And that's all very logical, right? So I'm not saying you don't need that. It's logical. But the most important thing when it comes to logic, personal credibility, or emotional connection is credibility and emotional connection. So what the story has done, your dad's story about measuring nails when he was a kid working in his dad's factory, it's created that emotional connection. We spoke about before, a good story taps into emotion, so it's already done the emotional connection. What it's given him is credibility. Now, it's not credibility in everything, but it's credibility in the message of he takes customer service serious. So he's talking about that, And it's through the story that builds credibility.
Yeah.
It's only through the story that builds credibility. Because every single person going for that job interview, if they knew customer service was a big thing, they would all go, customer service is really important to me.
Yeah.
I'm really behind. I think the customers, and they would say it all, but the sharing the story of him working in his dad's, factory gives him credibility that words alone will not do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a reference there and then in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess part of this podcast as well, I mean, I try and, if anything, speak to people like yourself or the leaders, etc., to educate, the next generation of marketers coming up on how to, I guess, if they want to become a leader, how to better themselves, One thing that does concern me and that I do see a lot is there's and I'm going to say maybe it's the COVID era to a degree. There's this generation coming through that unfortunately I find perhaps aren't as confident articulating or talking about who they are or what they're doing. Is there any advice for those guys that you can tap into? Like, I mean, what would you say to these, these younger generation coming through, like how they can better start to at least, listen and take note of what you're talking about when it comes to storytelling?
Yeah. So I think you're right. Like some people don't like selling themselves. They don't sort of like, it's like people often go to me, I'd like to tell a story, but I don't want to brag. And I go, okay, well, don't brag. Like we don't want to be the bragger, but sharing stories about what you learnt from that, the lesson I learnt from that was the importance of whatever. That's a really good way to share a story because it's not feeling like it's bragging. I love the advice from our respective mate, Jack Phillips, and she sort of said, when people go, well, what are your strengths? What are you good at? It literally saying, well, people have told me that I'm very good at this. So that it becomes like, oh, I'm good at this. Well, this is what people say about me. People have told me I'm good. So I love that technique. I know that's not a story, but you could do something like that and back it up with a story. So people have told me that I'm, very good at collaborating and making decisions, really being decisive with decisions. Okay, so share a story that does that. And again, they can be really powerful. And the stories can be both the personal stories and or the professional stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, especially when I've got clients within the world of HR, chief people officers that are looking at, we talk about now how actual employees are the brand advocates now, which, I mean, you're probably going, well, we knew that from way back when. This is, they're the storytellers within the business. But then you go on these websites and it's about us or it's our story. And it's not their story at all because they're using a load of jargon like we are innovative and we are collaborative and it's all blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, what would your advice be to these people? Like, I mean, I'm thinking if I was in a HR director role, I'd be going, right, let's get storytelling people.
Yeah. A couple of things I would say to those. But first of all, as we've spoken about, storytelling is an absolute skill, right? It's a skill. And so if you're in, whether you're a CEO or chief people officer or whatever, and you're going, okay, we want our people to be better at storytelling, you've got to teach them how to do it. Like, and I know I might be biased because this is my job, but you can't just go, start telling stories and not teach them how to do it because I've seen that done and it's absolutely setting them up for failure. And then the same, senior exec will go, we tried storytelling. It was like, yeah, you tried storytelling without learning how to do it properly, which means you were always going to fail. So it's an absolute skill. You might have seen some articles come out the last 6 months or so from the Wall Street Journal about the biggest increase in job titles has got storyteller in the title. They did all these research on LinkedIn. Now, part of me goes, I told you so. I knew storytelling was a skill. But part of me is really concerned that they're thinking storytelling, there's now a storytelling department.
Yeah.
And you know what it is? It's going to be the marketers. The marketers are now saying they're chief storytelling officers. My concern is that we almost outsource it because, like you said, the best brand ambassadors any organisation has is their employees.
100%.
Whether they're the front, whether they're the leaders, sharing stories internally, or whether they're the salespeople sharing stories externally to clients or potential clients, or they're the customer facing people, right? It's how they share stories. Your employees are the best brand ambassadors. So
Mhm.
I see the companies that implement storytelling really well. Yes, they train their leaders and they train their senior leaders and they train the marketers and comms people, but they train other people as well within the organization, because learning how to tell, and you know what, learning how to tell a story well is an absolute career skill. So I always say, like, why wouldn't you just invest your employees and give them that skill? This is a skill that's going to benefit for them for the rest of their career, and even in their personal life as well. It's like, invest in them, and don't just think that the marketing department is going to come up with stories that
Yeah.
then other people will
Yeah.
share. And that's when, exactly right, Lucy, you're listening to them and you go, oh my God, could you put any more jargon into that? And you know what? Most of the time, it's not a story. It's like,
Mm.
and I see that all the time on websites. It's our story or our stories. And I get in and have a look and I go, none of them were stories.
Yeah.
They're just,
Yeah.
they may be case studies, or they're just not stories.
No, no, exactly. Yeah, I've seen it myself actually. Yeah, a lot. And I think it's since our last chat, I've become a lot more wiser to it as well. What about those people out there that, they've been doing this, but they've got the top three stories and they keep regurgitating the good old top three stories on that conveyor belt, off they pop. Because that can be hard trying to constantly come up with new ones, like that are still going to have the same impact.
Yeah, it can be. And, but I'm going to answer this two ways. If you're a leader and you know you've got a story and it's almost become part of your signature story, you would use it all the time. Now, the problem is when it gets the same audience, hears it again and again and again, and the
Yeah.
audience go, oh my God, if I hear this story one more time. But, there's, and I can give you an example too of a leader that shared a great signature story, and she shares it all the time. And a lot of people have, in fact, I might give it to you because I haven't given an example. And this will talk about some of the things we've spoken about, how you can communicate values that give you credibility. So I worked, was working with an organization that, they wanted to teach their leaders how to communicate the values through stories. So great, went in. Her name was Anne, and she said one of the values she was trying to communicate was doing the right thing. So that was one of their company values. So went through that process. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? Made her really think about it. And she said, what it really means to me is doing the right thing all the time and not just when it suits us. So the story she shared, and I'll share the story and then we might just unpack why it works, is in the early 60s, my dad was a professional swimmer, and he reached the point in his career that he actually tried out for the national swim team. And on the day of the meet, he was doing his race and he got to the end and did the tubble turn and he misjudged and he missed the wall. Now, this was in the early 60s, so there was no sensors back then. There was judges. But with all that splashing and kicking, he knew they wouldn't know if he touched the wall or not. So he had to make a split-second decision. Does he go back and touch the wall, or does he just keep swimming? Now, he decided to go back and touch the wall. Now, you don't really recover from a race when you do that. And Dad didn't. He never won. There was probably a whole lot of other reasons, but he never made the national swim team. And growing up as a kid, I would often hear Dad share that story, and people would ask him, have you ever regretted going back and touching the wall? And he'd always say, I've never regretted that, because if I didn't go back and touch the wall, I'd have to spend the rest of my life knowing I did the wrong thing. And I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of our value, doing the right thing. It is only a matter of time before we come across our own go back and touch the wall moment. And I invite you to consider what my dad would do. Now, I want to put it there for go back to a couple of things. When Anne shares, every time someone comes and works for Anne, she shares that story. So it's sort of part of her personal induction program, because she has told me, I know the impact it has. I know the heavy lifting it does. She said that story demonstrates to them my leadership style. So she's not a win at all cost leader. She is, if we do the right thing and still don't achieve the outcome, I'll have your back. So she just shares that story every single time. She's been on podcasts and has shared the story. She's been on panels around leadership and shares the story. It's become part of her signature story. We talked about, logic, credibility and connection. So again, can you see, let's just say you were in a job interview and she was interviewing you and you were talking about, integrity and doing the right thing. And she could say, no, that's really important to us, blah, 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 words. But by sharing the story, I now truly believe and trust that she delivers on that is her leadership style, but it's only through the story I get credibility. Now, of course, you do have to deliver on that. That's the other thing. You got to deliver on that. But yeah, that's a customer story that she has shared. Like, this was 12 years ago I did the work with her and she still shares it. In fact, the last time I caught up with her was probably about this time last year. I said, are you still sharing your dad's story? And she went, absolutely. And then she said her dad had passed away like 3 months prior and she did the eulogy and she shared that story. So I was like, oh my God, that's so lovely. So if you've got a story that works, keep sharing it. But you also want to be on the lookout for other stories and that could potentially replace something like that. Or you just, you might be just sharing a story about something else and you need multiple stories. But I part of what I do, Lucy, is once I help people realize it's not the big, it's not the big aha moments, it's not the climbing Mount Everest, it's not the recovering from cancer type stories, it's just the little day-to-day ones. Once people realize that, something will happen and they go, oh, that's a great story about making assumptions, or that's a great story around collaboration, and they just start to use those stories.
Yeah, I love it. And that story in particular, I think really does hone in on, I think coming down to someone's authentic, their traits, very much trust.
Yeah.
And to your point, when she's telling that story, she's saying, look, you can make mistakes, but as long as you're honest and, it's that honesty. And I'm just saying, I'd be going, well, if I won that, I would have won that race and I hadn't touched the wall. And so actually I feel like a fraud, so I'd rather it's doing the right thing, isn't it?
And the other reason why that story works too is we spoke about this. It's a story about her dad. And when she tells it, what you see in her is pride. Like, she's really proud of her dad. And so, she was raised this way. This is not just a company value she's towing the line to, that you truly believe that this is important to her.
I love it. So my next question, we're going to wrap things up, but what is next for Gabrielle Dolan? I mean, how many books have you done now? 8? Is this going to be the last book?
Well, I said the last book was going to be the last book on storytelling, but I just felt I felt compelled to write this one because people kept asking, will AI replace storytelling? It's like, oh my God, no, it won't. And can you use AI to help with your stories? And my first response was, no, you cannot. That's cheating. That's not real. That's not keeping it real. But anyway, yeah, you can. Yeah. So what's next for me at the moment is I'm marketing the book. I think this book, it's 20 years of my everything. And I do believe this will be my last storytelling book. All right. So I just, I think it's timely. I think it's relevant. I'm just on a mission to let as many people know about the power of storytelling and the book. So that's my focus at the moment. On a personal level, I did turn 59 a few weeks ago, and I'm on a mission to be the fittest, healthiest, strongest I've ever been by the time I'm 60. So,
I love it.
Yeah, pumping a lot of weight.
Good on you. That's so good. I feel like that now. And I mean, God, it's kind of like mid-40s. I'm like, okay, next year we'll get to it. But good on you. Well, I've been reading this and I think it's really, really, honestly, I think it's great. And I'm really not just saying that. I think for anyone who's a leader, I don't think, and what I love about it, I think it relates to anyone, whether you're in marketing or not, anyone, I think if you want to harness yourself, how you're going to be better even in like personal life, the barbecue conversation, like really, down on that, I think it packs the punch for sure.
Yeah, well, there was even, I mean, because I do believe this is a life skill as well. I mean, there's a whole chapter in that on, what if you've got to give, a 21st speech or a best man speech or a eulogy? Just have stories. Just have stories for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I've really enjoyed catching up. Thank you so much, Raoul. It's been absolutely awesome. Love it. Love the energy. And honestly, I think there's going to be so much in this that people are going to go, right. Okay. That's how you do it. Right. The secret formula. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lucy.
Remember, the road to CMO isn't always linear. It's filled with challenges, decisions, and moments of transformation. Whether you're charting your course or navigating a career shift, the experiences, wisdom shared today, as with our guests, is invaluable. Thank you for joining us. Keep dreaming big, keep pushing boundaries, and remember that your journey towards becoming a CMO is as much about the destination as it is about the growth you experience along the way. Until next time, continue to innovate, evolve, and carve out your path to CMO.